Okay, so any questions from last week? Okay, I will slightly go back one slide. We were about Egypt and medieval. Yeah. Oh yeah. We were talking about Egypt. Let me check the screen recording. Yeah, that's correct. We were talking about Egypt and how pre, how the diseases were treated in a scientific way, like understanding the disease, planning a treatment, writing down what the treatment was, observing the results, and refining the treatment. So refining the medicine. So this worked, this didn't work, etc. So that was a method of science, sort of. But as you remember from last week, the science and religion was almost the same thing. So it was difficult to tell whether the person was a magician or religious guy or actual doctor or actual scientists or actual chemists. So it was mixed, and this was probably lasted until 17th century. So science and philosophy was always together. That's why we have the degree of PhD, philosophy degree, because PhD in computer science is not today related with the philosophy, but it used to be related. Okay? And it goes back to these years. In Mesopotamia, on the other hand, and in what was it? I think Sumer. In Sumerian time, they have two different doctors. One was the regular guy, like massage guy, technician guy. The other one was superior magician position. So magician kind of doctor was religious, but the physician and treatment guy was more like a barber. Okay, barber was able to pull the teeth, for example. So that kind of there is no magic involved. But if the disease is too complicated, like advanced diseases, then they can't figure out how it is, and then it becomes more like magic, religious rituals, etc. And this this time was conveyed through the papyrus documents found in certain places in Egypt. One of the papyrus was Eber's papyrus. It is 1550 BC. So roughly 3,500 years ago from now. And it has the evidence of traditional empiricism, so making experiments and observing the results about something. Then around 1000 BC and before, there was an Egypt. Hittites, Sumerians, etc. But past 1000 BC, and getting closer to zero, there was an not Hellenistic, but Greek antiquity time. So we call it as classical antiquity time. Classical, like the time of the philosophers, Greek philosophers, etc. We say, most people say it's Greek, but it's actually Anatolian. Most of them are in Anatolia, around Izmir, around Kuşadası and Millet, etc. Gökova. Some of them are in islands, and again, some of them are in Athens. The rest of the Greece, today's Greece, has not much that kind of significant philosophers and thinkers. It's more Anatolian side and the islands. That's what I know. We say the history of science in classical time, antiquity time, has both inquiries into workings of the universe, they try to understand the universe, or trying to find a calendar, making a calendar to get taxes, for example, or do some farming, or curing several diseases. We call it as natural philosophy. And one of the mosaics from Pompeii. Pompeii is the city in Italy, right? It was destroyed by an eruption, volcanic eruption, in the year 70 something, after AD, 70 something AD. So since it is destroyed in 70 AD after Christ, that means I think several hundred years at least the civilization was there. And one of the mosaics from there, the mosaics are very important source of information from that time. One of the mosaics from Pompeii shows Plato's academy. So there are students and there's Plato, etc. So it shows how the life was, how the schooling was in those times. Obviously, in Greek and Roman time, there were slavery. So there were slaves and regular people. So slaves are not shown in most cases. And thinking were more prevalent, more common than making experiments and you doing something technological. So they think a lot. Since there was no light much, no electricity, no gas lighting, so most philosophers think during the night as well. So they observe the sky. So things that are related to sky, beliefs that are related to sky, sky observation was much more interesting and common. And a lot of the philosophy was on observation of the sky. And it was one of the problems to explain what the universe is, how did we get here, and what is the purpose of life, etc. Those questions, philosophical questions, and causality, etc. Those are the topic generally taught by the philosophers and the topic of debates. Even then, there were two kind of knowledgeable people. One side was philosopher, natural philosopher kind, which is kind of away from the temples. I wouldn't say church because there wasn't church. There were temples. They were praying to Zeus. They were sacrificing people and animals to Zeus and other Greek gods. And so that was the that was the religion of that time. So two kinds of people were, two kinds of educated people were present. One of them was natural philosophers, others were temple healers, temple people. They were also knowledgeable, they can be right. And in the older Ptolemus, the older way of thinking was the earth was at the center and there were layers. Why did they think there were layers? Because the speed of things that are rotating was kind of different. Moon was rotating fast, but the stars are rotating slower, and there are other things that are fixed in the sky. Some stars are appearing as fixed. Some of them are rotating because of the elevation with respect to equator. And they come up with this circular explanation of the universe, and that was the norm for about 2,500 years. Around 2,500 years, people said Earth was at the center, etc., etc. And there were circles. All the religious books are based on that belief because of the time that they came. And before that, in Egypt and in Sumerian time, there were different explanations. Like there was a turtle. On top of turtle, there was an elephant. On top of elephant, there was another animal. On top of that, there was earth. So if turtle moves, earthquake happens. So something like that. At the top, there was a sky god protecting people from the disasters, etc. So let me show it. Yeah, this was one of the explanations. There was a turtle, an elephant, and the earth is on top of that. This was one explanation. Another explanation was this. There is a sun god. The bottom one is the ocean god, I think, the earth. Again, the turtle model is this. Flat earth stuff. Another turtle. Okay. So this was the belief, actually. This was taught, and if you are taught, you believe it in that time. Nobody questions where was the turtle, so nobody asks it. And this was also one thing. Yeah. This is the earth, like soil god. This was the sky god. So it encompasses our world, and I think this is the king. These kind of things were norm until Greek philosopher time. At Greek philosopher time, they think, no, there are stars, there are orbiting things, there is sun. Although it is wrong, but they said it is circular and the earth is at the center. So it's kind of a little bit more correct than the other one. gayret. So in that classical antiquity time, the Anatolian Aegean time, a lot of works was done, like Aristo, Archimedes, Hippocrates, Galen, Ptolemy, the solar system, Euclid, the mathematics, and others spread through the world. These works and important commentaries on them were the wellspring of the science. One of the oldest surviving fragments of Euclid's Elements book, found in some papyrus in AD 100, so little after the Pompeii time. The papyrus is the mathematics stuff. There are drawings on it. There are more. Many of the work done by Aristo, Hippocrates, and others, maybe Anaximander, etc., are not found, but they are referred in books that are written some years, not much, but some years, like 100 years or 50 years later, by other scientists. Since they refer to the other guy, we now understand that there was a guy who was named Aristo and did blah blah blah blah thing. So original book is not found in many cases. Some pieces, some parts, some writings are found, but for example, Euclid's Elements book is not found completely, but rather copies of the same text was found, which is still original. So, yeah, as I said, after 1000 BC, Greek Anatolian Aegean thing ramped up. And for example, Hesiod, 700 BC, he worked in calendar, days and works and the week, etc. So where the farmer has to regulate activities, when to crop, how many days we have to wait, and when do we get taxes from the farmers. So calendar working was kind of government and also planning for the farming. And also they studied the phases of the moon to establish months, etc. Around, after several hundred years, it's not a simple thing. Around 400 BC, we begin to see compilations of the seasonal appearances and disappearances of the stars. So people looked at the sky and studied stars. They appear, disappear. So world is rotating this way and rotating this way in the orbit. They didn't know it, but they say some stars are appearing, some stars are disappearing because they are on the northern hemisphere. The Greece is, and Anatolia is in northern hemisphere. So if the star becomes invisible, then they say seasonal disappearance of the star. They think things around Earth was rotating seasonally rather than Earth was doing this. So astronomy was popular. This is, I think that is Acropolis from Athens. No? And Hippocrates. Hippocrates was in Kos, in İstanköy. There is a significant amount, there was actually, but still there was a significant amount of Turkish population in Kos. One of them was my friend from college, Mustafa. Around 400 BC, he lived there, And there were also temple healers. Üfürükçü. Okay. Temple healers. All the years this happens. You get sick. One intelligent guy say, okay, I have a connection with the other world. So if I say certain words to you, I can make you better. And you pay them, and they make you feel better because you pay them. If it is free, you don't get well. If it is paid, you get well. Therefore, it has a placebo effect, and placebo effect has proven it is an effect. That's why I'm not joking. So if you pay someone to make you feel better, you actually feel better because your emotional system thinks that it must worth to pay because you paid, and you start to observe yourself for the good things, and then that makes you feel better, and if you feel better, you actually become better. That is the placebo effect for some diseases. In the Hippocratic tradition, temple healers associated with the cult of Asclepius, herb collectors, drug sellers, midwives, gymnastic trainers, all claimed to be qualified as healers in specific context and competed actively for patients because they were rich. Anatolia is rich because food is plenty, there were slaves, there were trade in the Mediterranean. So as you get rich, you start looking at yourself, you want to live longer, feel better, so then medicine emerges. So he, in the text on the sacred disease, which deals with the nature of epilepsy, Sarah. On epilepsy, he says, the temple healers ignores it and correlates it to the external beings, like gods, etc., or souls, dead souls, bad souls, etc. And he talks about temple healers, about their ignorance. He says epilepsy may have a natural cause, but although he says he may have a natural cause, not a bad soul, the solution was not given. So he thinks about it, but that's it. In the island, they didn't have hospitals, they didn't have technology. It is the Istanköy Island, so what could it be, right? Just thinking. So before there was a Socrates, before Socrates there were other philosophers. They tried to find answers to the same question, but how did the ordered cosmos in which we live come to be? So how did we come here? In Greek, God's creation diagram, the names of the gods, I'm trying to be correct. The names of the gods are associated with the stages of creation. Stages of creation. Their explanation. There was only one God, then he thought to have some kids. He made the kids, multiple kids. Then they married each other, and then other children. So let me find it for you. So it is interesting. Yeah. Yes. Tıklasam gelir mi acaba? So there was first chaos. I don't know the details, but chaos said Erebus is going to be present. Then there was ether. Ether means emptiness. There was also an ether theory before modern science to explain the vacuum. Then ether and Hemera married, right? Ether and Hemera married, and they have 4 kids: Gaia, Tartarus, Eros, Pontus. They all have special representations when you visit the historical places, and they also have special tasks. Through Gaia, married with Uranus, they have Oceanus, then these kids, Poseidon, and this, where was Zeus? Zeus has here, and then Leto and Zeus made Artemis and Apollo, and these guys created these. Zeus is here, Zeus plus Hera, Ares, Hebe, Hepratus, Dionysus, and Athena. Forget about details, but this is the family tree of Greek gods, and each natural phenomena happening, social thing, all the explanation of the universe was based on this relation. Some of them are carried over Middle Eastern religions. So some of the tasks are transferred to angels in Christianity and Islam and Judaism. So but that's what people say. The correlation between angels and the Greek gods are quite similar. That's what they say. And the tasks. One of them was responsible from taking people's lives. One of them was responsible from the end of the universe. One of them was responsible from the weather, etc. So all of them was related. But again, they had the top single time, and these you can. Let's ask Chaos the God. Chaos was the first of the primeval gods and precedes the universe. It was followed in quick succession by Gaia. Gaia becomes the earth. So before earth, there was chaos. Yani kaotik falan diyoruz ya. Chaos, the word chaos comes from that. Tartarus, underworld. Eros, the life. And then so on. This is the chaos. Anyway, this is later the picture after Renaissance, because up until Renaissance there was no picture like this. Anyway. So generally, their explanations tended to center on the material source of things. Suddenly, we see Greek philosophers shift towards material explanation of everything. Everything is made up of like water, fire, blah blah. So they try to find answers, and they never think there was a soul or imaginary things. They try to explain everything with materialistic explanations, which is okay, but it was interesting for that time. Thales, Anaximander, etc. in Millet is in Turkey, you know. Thales said, all things come to be from and find their sustenance, being in water. Everything is from water, with some ratio. Anaximander suggested that things could not come from specific substance like water, but rather from something he called boundless. So, kind of atomic explanation. Not atom yet, but he says water is too simple for it, so something different makes the substance. Anaximenes, again in Miletus, again said air could be altered by condensation and evaporation. He added common observations to demonstrate that air was substance, and simple experiment, breathing one's hand, showed that it could be altered by rarefaction and condensation, evaporation and condensation. In Efes, Heraklitus, kaç kişi Efes'e gitti? O iyi. Gitmeyenler gitsin. Öğrencilere ya ücretsiz ya çok ucuz müze kartlar. Ve şeye gidin mutlaka ama. Apartmanlar kısmına, sonradan bulunan kısımlara gidin. Orası önemli. Bir amfiteyatr falan çok önemli değil. Önemli de yani çok önemli değil. Change, rather than any substance, was fundamental, although the element fire seemed to play a central role in his process. So Heraclitus says fire changes things. The change is important. Empedocles, again, said water, air, earth, water, air, and fire. Yılmaz komedyenin adı neydi? Cem Yılmaz. Cem Yılmaz'ın hava su tahta diyordu ya. So that's what they said. Earth, water, air, and fire. Combination of that makes the universe. And there are forces like magnets, love and strife. They attract and repel. Empedocles was influenced by Pythagoras, and Pythagoras' students challenged the practice of animal sacrifice and killing animals for food. So living was important to him, something that is living. So he became vegetarian. So he said we shouldn't kill animals because animals might have some special purpose, special being. They are special being. And also he developed an interesting doctrine of reincarnation. So, for example, an animal after their life may reborn as a human. So if we kill them, we are killing a human, for example. It's typically the same in India. So if you are a good person, you will be in the next level of the caste system. If you are a bad person, if you behave bad, you will be an animal in your next life. So choose whatever you want. If you want to go down, you can behave badly. If you want to go up, behave better. How? After the death. That's interesting because that keeps the people behaving in good way, and they cannot see the result because that will be in the next life, and you won't be remembering it. So nobody says I was a frog in my past life, so this time I am good. Since none of us remembers it, it was a good theory to teach people. Then Democritus, Democritus and Leucippus. Names are not that important, by the way. They came up with the notion that there were two real entities, atoms, that they named it atoms. There were small indivisible particles of matter and emptiness, void, which was the empty space. So a combination of that two creates matters with different proportions. So obviously they didn't know what elements are, but they said there are atoms. This is only through observation and thinking. Experimentation was very limited because there were no technology. The Pythagoreans are the materialist explanations of the origins of the cosmos seems to me is an important point. It doesn't make much sense to think that ordered universe comes out from the random collection of matter. So materialistic explanation is kind of failing. How can random assemblage of fire, water produce an ordered universe without the existence of some ordering principle? So then God notion comes into. That's what they taught. The first step in the emphasis of the model was that the followers of Pythagoras around 500 BC, before Christianity, but after Judaism. Judaism was there. But they were a little far away from each other. Fundamental unchanging entity underlying the structure of the universe. For Pythagoras and followers, matter was made up of ordered arrangements of atoms, arranged according to geometrical principles into triangles, squares, rectangles, and so on. In that years, Pythagoreans, they studied mathematics and geometry for themselves. And they were astonished. Since they were astonished, they tried to explain everything with geometry, mathematics. They said, mathematics can explain this. We were curious about how did it come together, the world, and suddenly they started mathematics and triangles and rectangles, etc. They said, okay, this can explain it. So they said, universe is arranged on numbers and also musical scales. Musical scales are also interesting. At each note, like do, re, mi, fa, sol, there were multiples of the same frequencies. So there is a frequency counterpart of those notes. So they said, okay, those notes are, the musical notes are actually, they don't know what frequency is, but the notes are related to the sound, and that was correlated to the length of the rope, length of the string. So they said universe is mathematics and some musical scale principles, and we can explain it. They were happy with it. So they attributed a lot to mathematics to explain the universe. They thought everything can be explained in mathematics. Ordering principle of universe in mathematics, Plato, specifically in geometry. Later account that Plato had inscribed the entrance to the school. Let no man ignorant of geometry enter. Geometri bilmeyen giremez demiş. Şeyin kapısına, okulun kapısına. because in order to explain the universe, you have to, in order to explain the universe and think, first you have to know the geometry. But we don't know if it is true or not, but it was important, and geometry and mathematics was the tool to explain the universe for them. At the same time, there were temple people, which are different. Plato was known for his contribution to the philosophical basis, Eflatun, scientific method, then to particular scientific concepts, to the method. He maintained that all things in the material world are imperfect reflections of eternal unchanging ideas, just as mathematical diagrams and reflections of eternal unchanging mathematical truths. There is a truth, mathematical truth, and existence is the reflection of that truth. Since Plato believed that material things had an inferior kind of reality, he considered that we don't achieve demonstrative knowledge, the kind of knowledge we call science, by looking at the imperfect material world. We cannot do it by looking at the imperfect world. We have to switch to the abstract level, which is mathematics. If we study this, we can't finish it. We have to do abstract mathematics to explain the wood, which is kind of wrong, but has some importance. Then the student of Plato, as Aristo, truth is to be found through rational demonstrations analogous to the demonstrations of geometry. Applying the concept, Plato recommended that astronomy be studied in terms of geometrical models and proposed that elements were particles constructed on geometrical basis. So geometry. Aristo disagreed with his teacher. Aristo agreed that truth must be eternal and unchanging, so it has to be material. Biri mühendis, öbürü teorik fizikçi gibi düşünün yani. He maintained that he come to the know to truth going through external world which we perceive with our senses. Gördüğümüz, baktığımız, ölçtüğümüz şeylere göre bulacağız. Derler ya Aristo mantığı, düz mantık. For Aristo, directly observable things are real. Ideas, forms only exist as they express themselves in matter, such as in living things, or in the mind of an observer or artisan. Even if it is an idea, like political view, you have a political view. Aristo says, you have a political view because of your brain. So the brain is wired so that the political view is there. So it can be explained by the matter. So ideas also can be explained through the matter. Either of them is completely not correct. So Aristo was one of the most prolific natural philosophers of antiquity. He made countless observations of the structure and habits of animals, classification, understanding, writing, especially those in the sea at Lesbos. Lesbos adasını biliyorsunuz. Türkçesi ne? Bir baksanıza. Neresiymiş? Midilli. Lesbos, Midilli. Türkler çok yüzme bilmedikleri için adalar Yunanlılara kaldı Kurtuluş Savaşı'ndan sonra. Denizciliğimiz 1800'lerden sonra yok oldu. Ondan önce de zaten Türk olmayanlar denizciydi. Yani bilmiyoruz kimler denizci ama daha çok büyük ihtimal korsanların Müslüman olmasıyla yürüyen bir mekanizma vardı yani. Aristo also observed how the universe is working, and then he wrote several things that helped development of the physics of today. He developed a version of the classical theory and elements, earth, water, fire, and ether. Ether was the god, and a vacuum. In his theory, light elements, fire, air, have a natural tendency to move away from the center of the universe, while heavy elements try to get together, and they form the substances, earth, and everything. Since the celestial bodies around the world, that planets and stars were seen to move in circles, he concluded that they must be made of the fifth element, which he called ether, the space. Then, around 400, 300, there was an Alexander the Macedonian king. He was a young guy. That was the mosaic shows him, a young person riding a horse. He invaded Anatolia, including Greece, Iran, Persia, and India. So, and Northern Africa. That spread the Greek thought and exchanged ideas through Egypt, Anatolia, Persia, and India. So certain ideas, people come and go in between. The resulting Hellenistic civilization produced seeds of learning in Alexandria in Egypt, Antakya in Syria in that time. That's interesting. This is from somewhere else. So Antiyok, Hatay. Alexandria, İskenderiye. Kahire değil. Arada bir 150 kilometre, 200 kilometre var galiba. So Greek became the language of science and philosophy. Some people were speaking their own language, but they were writing in Greek because of the culture. It was a cultural language. Hellenistic science, we call them Hellenistic science, differed from Greek science. Now it is called Hellenistic, not Greek. Hellenistic science differed from Greek science in the last two ways. It benefited from cross-fertilization of Greek ideas that developed in the larger Hellenistic world. Secondly, to some extent, it was supported by royal patrons and the kingdoms founded by Alexander's successors, so pushed by the kings too. Especially important in Hellenistic science was the city of Alexandria, which became the major center of scientific research in the 3rd century BC. So, just around Romans were coming. One of the artifacts that remains from those years was this mechanism, Antikythera mechanism, thought to be made in 100 BC, made up of gears, etc. Computes the eclipses, lunar and solar eclipses, and the position of the moon, etc. On the basis of astronomical periods believed to be learned from Babylonians by Hellenistic people. How many of you watched Indiana Jones, last one? I think you should watch it. The the whole film was around this architectural mechanism. They thought this was a time-changing machine. So in the Second World War, Germans realized that, correct me if I'm wrong, Germans realized that they were losing the war, and in order to fix their mistakes, they want the world time go back about 2 years. Okay? And according to legend, this was the time-changing machine. They were trying to find it in the Mediterranean Sea. Actually, they found it, and the Indiana Jones was trying to capture it, whatever. And they started the device on the plane. The Nazis started to play with it, and suddenly it was incorrectly adjusted, and they moved back to which time? Archimedes time, I think, and Roman time. So suddenly they found themselves not in 1945, but in something 300 BC or 100 BC, in those years, in the middle of the war. But there were Roman soldiers, etc. And I think he was Archimedes Archimedes. The Indiana Jones talked to Archimedes. There were 2 planes fall down, so 2 German planes fall down in the Roman time. Archimedes was observing what was that, etc. And Archimedes took the watch of the German soldier for himself because he was dead. And then they talked to Archimedes, and they said Indiana Jones realizes that he was the Archimedes. So talk to him, and then they realized that they came from the future, and Archimedes says bye-bye, we have to go back, but kept the watch, and the film always goes back. At the beginning of the film, Indiana Jones found a tomb of the Archimedes, and there was a watch on the wrist. That watch was from the time shift issue. Anyway, the thing was on this device. It's actually a simple device, not time-changing device, but it's always good to watch films like this, make you feel better. He anticipated modern calculus and analysis by applying concepts of infinitesimals, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, etc., and the method of exhaustion to derive and rigorously prove the range of geometrical theorems, such as area of circle, surface and volume of the sphere, area of an ellipse, which is not easy, area under the parabola, volume segment of the parabolic revolution, and hyperbolic revolution. So area of the spiral, those kind of things were calculated by Archimedes around 200 BC. His mathematical achievements include deriving an accurate approximation of pi, number pi, defining and investigating the spiral that now bears his name, Archimedes spiral, and creating the system using exponentiation for every very large number. So also found exponentiation. He was also one of the first to apply mathematics to physical phenomena, founding hydrostatic and statics, including an explanation of the principle of the lever, kaldıraç. He is credited with designing innovative machines such as his screw pump, Arşimet pompası, compound pulleys, defensive war machines, o filmde vardı işte o war machine'ler yaptığı, defensive war machines, to protect his native Syracuse from his invasion. Where is Syracuse? Syracuse was not in Anatolia. Syracuse is now in Greece. The exact location is south of Athens, I think. in the south of today's Greece. Not very south, but something closer to middle, but south. There is also another Syracuse in United States, which the university was quite popular, Syracuse University. Now we come back to Euclid. Euclid was a mathematician at Alexandria, also tutored kings. His book, named Elements, is one of the most influential works in history of mathematics, serving as the main textbook for teaching mathematics in 2,500 years. 2,500 years. So think about a mathematical book which was the textbook over 2,000 years, and that is Euclid's Elements. It was taught in universities, in mathematics departments, until 1960s. Until 1960s, it was the textbook. Euclid also wrote works on the perspective, conic sections, spherical geometry, number theory, and mathematical rigor, etc. This is the Elements. Obviously, that book is a later copy. Original copies are like that on the right, and most of them are lost. So, but since in those years, books are copied all the time, manually, right? So people find copies of it, copies and copies, copies of it. So it's like photocopying. The original is lost, but the content is preserved by copying. That was one of the books in medieval time, in 1500s. I will come to that later, and it was translated to other languages, including Turkish, but the years are interesting. It was translated to Arabic in 1000, in the early Islamic time. It was translated to Greek, it was translated to French in 100 years ago, etc. 200 years ago, 500 years ago, in 1500, 600. It was translated to Turkish in 1998. So I have the table for it. Aristophanes was also in Alexandria. He is best known for being the first person to calculate the circumference of the Earth. What? He says Earth is round. So he wasn't the guy who says Earth was flat. He was saying that Earth is sphere. And he calculated the size of the Earth. When? 250 BC. No, 200 BC. And he also was the first to calculate the tilt of the Earth's axis with significant accuracy. They still think sun is rotating around Earth, but Earth is inclined. Okay? So he calculated how much it is tilted. He may have accurately calculated the distance from the Earth to Sun and invented the leap day. So 29 February was invented by Aristophanes. 365 gün 6 saat. He created the first global projection of the world, incorporating the parallels and meridians based on the available geographic knowledge of his era. So, how big is the Earth? How far we go? He did it by. Sıkmıyorum değil mi size? Sor.
Dünyanın neye göre eğri olduğunu hesapladı ki o zaman?
Şimdi yazın güneş yukarıda, kışın aşağıda ya. Şimdi dönüyor diyor. Lan diyor biz diyor günlük de böyle dönüyoruz diyor. Her gün böyle dönüyor diyor. Demek ki diyor dünya eğri diyor. Etrafında güneş de böyle dönüyor diyor. 23 derece 27 dakika. Aslında öyle değil. Güneş duruyor, dünya böyle dönüyor ama o dünya ortada ama eğik diye düşünüyor. Çünkü bir böyle bir böyle şey yapması lazım. Oynaması lazım. Birçok şey de yanlış tabii. Hani her şeyi böyle doğru yapmış diye düşünmemek lazım. Sadece çalışmış. Bunun he did it. Şuradan şey yapalım. Şimdi bu adam bu hesabı yapıyor. Tam öğle saatinde bir kuyu kazıyor. Güneş kuyunun tam dibine delik. Güneş kuyunun tam dibine geldiğinde tamam diyor şey. O zaman. Başka bir yere gidiyor. Uzakta 5000 adım. Orada da açıyı ölçüyor. Aynı anda. Bu sefer burası dik, burası açılı. Güneşin ışıklarının paralel geldiğini varsaydığına göre yukarıdan 2 tane geliyor. Şu açıyı buluyor. Bu açının alttaki açıyı. Şu alttaki açıyı parmağımla gösteriyorum, siz görmüyorsunuz. Bu açıyı buluyor. Bu açı çemberde bu kadar adımla gidiyor. Bunu da köleye ölçtürüyor. Köleyi buradan buraya yürüttürüyor, adımlattırıyor. Bu kadar uzaklık olursa bu çemberin tamamı ne kadar büyüklüktedir diye hesap ediyor. Ve tabii yarı çapında dünyanın büyüklüğünü bulabiliyor yani. Bu adam. Bu kadar. Yani çok da şey değil. Ama bunu dünyanın yuvarlak olduğunu düşüneceksin. Büyüklüğünü düşüneceksin, açıyı düşüneceksin. Bunlar kolay şeyler değil. Bir taraftan da insanlar, bir taraftan da şey tarafı var. Yani, temple'cılar var. Aman ha işte öyle değil. Kaplumbağa var. Kaplumbağanın üstünde filler var falan. Yani bir de o var yani. Onlarla bir de mücadele var. Aynı dönemde Alexandria ile Siena de şurası öyle yakın değil. Kolay bir şey değil yani. Şey yapıyor galiba. Güneşin tam tepeye geldiği her gün aynı ya. Güneş orada da tepeye geliyor, orada da tepeye geliyor. Tam tepeye geldiğinde ölçtüğünde aynı an olduğunu düşünüyor. Yani bir gün sonra ölçülür veya birkaç gün sonra. Detaylarını ben de bilmiyorum da işte böyle yani. Belki başka türlü yapmış olabilir. Ama köle gönderdiğini biliyorum aradaki mesafe için. Kolay değil o zamanlar. Böyle bir tane kadın var mesela. Bu kadın babası da o zamanın düşünürlerinden. Kütüphanede çalışıyor falan orada. İşte ilk kadın bilim adamı. İlk kadın bilim adamı derler. Bunu işte Temple'cılarla şey yaptığı için, tartıştığı için en sonunda taşlayarak öldürüyorlar bu öldürme sahnesinden bir şey işte. Kafasına taş atıyorlar vesaire. Yani kavga çok büyük o zamanlarda. Bunun söylediği bir laf vardır. Şu mu? Mathematician. First woman in... Şimdi kadın öğrencilerimiz okusunlar bunu. First woman in history to make contribution to in fields. He was a compiler, editor and preserver of the early mathematical work. Aslında orada çalışıyormuş yani. Çünkü onlara pek şey tanınmıyor ya. Babasının yanında çalışıyormuş. Çocuk büyümüş, işte öğrenmiş her şeyi falan. Was the head of the Platonist school where she taught math, philosophy and scientific aspects of Neoplatonism. Her death marked the decline of the Alexandria as a center of learning. Alexandria'nın geri gidişinin şeyidir, başıdır. Herkes bir şeyler söylerler. Tabii orijinal resmi yok. Herkes kendi sevdiği kadının resmini çiziyor. Onun resmi diye şey yapıyorlar. Şöyle bir lafı var mesela burada. Fables should be taught as fables, myth as myths, and miracles as poetic fantasies. To teach superstitions as truths is a most terrible thing. Bu Mısır'daki dönemi anlatıyor. Child mind accepts and believes them, and only through great pain and perhaps tragedy he can be after years relieved of them demiş. Evet, dolayısıyla taşlanarak öldürülmüş. Şurada görüldüğü gibi. Okay. Bunun arkasından Aristoteles hakikaten iyi matematikçi. Bir de this Hellenistic time and Greek time is different than today's Greece. It was Egypt, Anatolia, Phoenicia, North Africa, so everywhere. So people were local. Okay, so it doesn't mean that there was a Greek state and the Greek state was conquered those places. No, it was the cultural thing. It was the cultural progress. Actually, the Greeks before Alexander, they were made up of smaller kingdoms, city-states. Okay, so the central government usually didn't exist that much until Romans. With the Romans, yes, there was a central government. And then Roman Empire, which is one of the greatest empires, they also conquered England. So England was conquered by Romans. Science in the Roman Empire was concerned with the systematizing knowledge gained in Hellenistic period, and knowledge from the vast areas of Romans had conquered it. It was largely their work and would be passed on later civilizations. They were good, but they were not as good as Hellenistic as thinkers. They were engineers. So they used the knowledge, but they didn't put much on it. The second item, even though the science continued under the Roman Empire, Latin texts were mainly compilations of earlier Greek work. The language of Roman Empire was Latin. Language of Hellenistic time was Greek. And actually they don't like each other to some degree. Latin texts were mainly compilations of drawing on earlier Greek work. Advanced scientific research and teaching continued to be carried in Greek. Such Greek and Hellenistic works survived, were preserved and developed later in Byzantine Empire and Islamic world. Late Roman attempts to translate Greek writings into Latin had limited success, and direct knowledge of most ancient Greek texts only reached Western Europe after 12th century. So between I think between 400 and 1100, how many years? 700 years. 700 years was dark in Europe and in Middle East. The names were Ptolemy, Galen, etc. Also, there was India. Earliest traces of mathematical knowledge in India found in 4th millennium BC, 400 BC, 3 BC. The people of this civilization made bricks whose dimensions were in the proportion of 4 to 1. The bricks. Indian astronomer around again 400 BC introduced number of trigonometric functions including sine, cosine, inverse, arc cosine, arc sine, trigonometric tables, techniques and algorithms and algebra. 6 as after Christ, so it's AD. In 600 AD, they said gravity was force of attraction, so they explained gravity. Two substances pull each other. He explained the use of zero. Zero was found by Arabs and Indians together, both as a placeholder and decimal digit, along with the Hindu-Arabic numeral system, now which is universal. Then I will have another chapter in Islamic part. Science in the medieval Islamic world was the science developed and practiced during the Islamic Golden Age. Under Umayyads of Cordoba, Abbasids of Seville, and Samanids and Ziyarids, and Buyids. The Abbasi Khalifa and beyond, spanning the period roughly between 780 up to 1200s. Islamic scientific achievements encompassed a wide range of subject areas, especially astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. Other subjects of scientific inquiry included alchemy, making gold, and chemistry, botany and agronomy, geography, cartography, ophthalmology, pharmacology, physics, and zoology. Until 1258, when Islamic scholars said it is not good to study material things, it is not good to study world, you have to focus on praying, starting with Ghazali and etc. Before that, they were studying. Medieval Islamic science had practical purposes as well as the goal of understanding. For example, astronomy was useful for determining the Qibla in the direction to play. Botany had practical application in agriculture, etc. Ibn Sina and Jamshid al-Kashi made advances in algebra, trigonometry, geometry, and Arabic numerals. There were Islamic doctors described diseases like smallpox and measles, challenged classical Greek and medical theory. So they improved on it. Biruni, Ibn Sina, and others. Ibn Sina is Avicenna in international text. Others described as preparation of hundreds of drugs made from medicinal plants and chemical compounds, etc. So medicinal technology was invented. They also criticized Aristotle's view of motion. So there is a document. I'm going to put that into reading section. Why the Arabic world turned away from science. We say Arabic world because Turks were not that dominant culture in the Islamic culture, although there were Turks. Ibn Sina was Turk. All the great Seljuk Empire was Turkish, so a lot of things were done in Turkish, but the center was around, the science center was around Baghdad, okay, which is Arabic. I think we can stop here. I have This is University of Constantinople. I'm gonna do it in the later time. This is the picture of Istanbul around 1200. Okay, let me stop recording.